poisoning was, well, let's say, in the days prior to it, it seemed like about 2 or 3 weeks, about 2 weeks prior to the August 24th of 2000, there were some attempts putting some crap in my drink, and so I was getting like nervous, and wasn't really saying anything. We had a late night one time, and they ordered pizza, and somehow the poison was laced. And Con Rathachek, I think is his name, he makes mention to that, it's going to be okay, Chris, it's going to be okay. It's like he knew that it was, it's like he knew what I was thinking when I was eating this pizza, and I wasn't really, it's going to be okay, you're going to be dead soon. That's what he's kind of meaning. That's what I was interpreting. And thought nothing really of it until I threw up massively about 3 or 4 hours later in the middle of the night. The next day was a 1 second. There was a corporate cup event, which is kind of an athletics thing. You roll boat and you do other sort of throw rings and stuff, or some kind of competition between other companies. And that was the following day. Well, I went to work. I went home. I think at noon, and then I went back for the corporate cup that later on that. But I wasn't able to perform. I wasn't talking to anybody except for I think I talked to Bob Moore. And I think was it in the following day? I think it was poison that night, and then the next morning I can't remember if I talked to Bob. I talked to him outside, and I think I've been poisoned. And I can't remember the exact details, but it was after the corporate cup, the following day. I may have told Bob this, but then I talked to Noah, and he came up with a good idea. He says, hey, that's pretty out there, but you know what? Let's go to the hospital and get your blood tested. A very good idea. So I went there, and I got caged up. Went to the ER, and there was a sticker on the wall saying, Poison Control Center. But evidently that's for humans, not animals. Because when you're an animal like me who's mentally ill, you are considered delusional, and nothing is taken seriously. So the safeguards for humans, like on the sticker on the wall for Poison Control Center, that's not meant for me. That's meant for humans. So I was there in the ER for approximately 15 minutes, and they took me to the mental hospital for a 72-hour hold, injected me with something to sedate me, because I guess I was just unsafe for my own good, so they had to sedate me. Probably turns out I needed that drug, whatever the hell that was, for my spiritualness. It seems like everything happens for a reason, usually 2 or 3 or 4 reasons. Unfortunately, there was only one reason for going to the mental hospital. That was basically to get bent over by everybody. But when I was in there, they threw away this coffee sample I had that was spiked maybe the previous days. Threw that away, didn't test my blood, got records from the hospital. They didn't take anything seriously. And I was scared. I was scared to talk. And other than the fact that thought I was poisoned, there was what I should have done, what I could have should have done is gone to the police. But I was just scared crapless because nobody's taking me seriously. So what's the use? So the people in the hospital, they said, just take your drugs and everything's going to be okay. So I did. I took the drugs, 20 milligrams of Zyprexa, and I think 750 grams of Depakote. It's basically enough to sedate a horse for a 20. Your first dosage, you give that to a horse, they're going to be sleeping for 18 hours. Or a person's going to be sleeping for 18 hours. You give that to a person first time. That's what eventually got up to a dosage. And people were getting diabetes based off Zyprexa. So luckily, nothing like that occurred for me. But I basically took it for a year and a half, pretty solid dosage. And nobody poisoned me since that time, but basically because, I don't know, these guys that did it, evidently, they got spooked or something. I don't understand why they stopped, but they did. The reason why they poisoned me, I should tell you about this. It's kind of a my practical jokester. It's kind of a gag I did gone backfired. When I first got the GE, I noticed a copy. I sent Dan some email, and I noticed I sent Dan over in Chicago some email, and then I go into the administrator office, and Keith Hendrickson, he's the administrator to the place. He knows he's a computer. He's basically the guy who can. It's computer gods when it comes to giving administrative rights. Anyways, he was getting a copy of my emails that I sent, not to him, but to Dan. But he set it up so that he gets a copy. So I saw this in his inbox, and a couple weeks later, I saw another one. I saw two emails that I sent to Dan in his inbox. So he's seeing a copy of my crap. So I realized this is invasion of privacy, and I'm a little pissed off. So through my psychic senses, I realized that about seven people total are getting this email, including Mike Wellison and Russ Knoble. I just didn't like that. I just didn't appreciate that. So I started getting nasty. I started talking about her. Everybody's wife is going to be my wife. I had been primed with this in the previous year that, hey man, I get to mate with everybody's wife. So why not joke around about it? So I get to say that, hey, Mike Willison's wife is going to be my wife, and I get to bang her, and she gets to have my kid and all that. So this is what I'm saying, and I realize this is probably going to be offensive. So this is the motive for killing me. Not to mention that when I first got there to GE, I started saying I was Jesus or God on this wild story, and that's why Heath Hendrickson was monitoring my email, because they want to watch out. They want to see what this guy's like. They want to make sure for their own protection that this guy's not going to do anything strange. Well, so in investigating me, I find this out. I find out they're monitoring me, and so I make it juicy. I make some juicy stuff, and this is what I was afraid. I don't know why I was afraid to say this. I said I was poisoned at the hospital, but I didn't say what the motive was. Nobody believed me, so why even talk about a motive? They kept saying at the hospital, Chris, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're delusional. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. Just take your drugs, and everything's going to be okay. So I didn't even have a chance to talk about this with anybody. But that's what was going on. I know for a fact, I saw with my own eyes, 2 copies of emails in Heath Hendrickson's inbox. The psychic senses, and that's not quite real, but I'm pretty sure it was accurate. I pretty much knew who was monitoring me. And I would sort of say in some of the emails to Dan Copy. By the way, I was sending these emails, these offensive ones, to Dan Copy, who wasn't even responding. It was kind of like this weird phenomenon in which I could send out the weirdest emails to my friends, and they wouldn't respond. Okay, it was kind of like a weird thing that was going on with Nathan Lehman, Dan Copy. A lot of my friends, they get, no matter how weird it was, they didn't care, and they didn't really respond. So, one second. So I'm at the hospital, and Bob Moore is concerned. Noah Allard, who recommended me to go to the hospital, he was like, God, I feel bad, man. I'm sorry, what happened? You know, everybody's like wondering what's going on and feeling bad. And Bob Moore visited me in the hospital. We talked, and I got out, 72-hour hold, I got out on a Monday or whatever. I think it was over a weekend. And I go back to work, kind of like nothing's happened. And actually, I got back, and I kind of go off on this dude, was being a weenie. Let me see if I remember his name. Rod is his name. I think Rod. Anyways, he's the install dude. And I didn't, me and him were having a little bit of a problem before this, anyways, I'm just in a bad mood because I've just been let out of a place where I'm just trying to conduct a test to see if I got poisoned, and I'm in a bitter mood. I'm pissed off that this has happened. And so I snap at Rod, and then Rich comes over, Rich Adcock, and says, "Hey, Chris, just go home and come back the next day." And it was kind of fine from that point on. But what was in the lawsuit is that Bob Moore did not come visit me. So there's a lie under oath. And that was happening while I was on massive amounts of drugs during my lawsuit with GE. Lies were happening. Lies were being told under oath. And it's because I was heavily sedated on these drugs. Well, anyway, some lies got through that Bob did not visit me, that no one knew that I was on medication, that I was having any problems with my meds, like too much drugs and stuff, heavily sedated, and everybody's saying that, hey, we didn't know Chris was mentally ill. But the people didn't. The people that were in on this hit, that tried to poison me, it's amazing, they stopped doing it. They stopped doing it. So, I think they stopped doing it because I was talking with Brian Stack from the Conan O'Brien show. I was trying to tell him, some of the messages I was sending off to him, I knew people were tracking that. So, I'd be sending off to, send messages off to him, these people will eventually pay, I guess, for poisoning me or whatever. And again, Brian is not responding to these. It's a phenomenon in which I can send off some weird stuff, and if they do ever respond, which I think he did a few times, but it's kind of like, Chris, I don't know what you're talking about, but I wish you the best, kind of things like that. But I think it was a Brian Stack thing, which started happening shortly before the poisoning. We were getting bought by GE just as the poisoning occurred. We were Micromedical before that. GE bought them, and I was introduced to Brian Stack at the Conan O'Brien show, and we were corresponding for a little bit before the poisoning, and then after that. I think that's what cooled them down from. They started realizing that maybe something is going on. Yeah, maybe, but